Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to the WP Builds podcast. This is episode number 185, entitled Why You Should Automate All the Things with James Rose. It was published on Thursday the 25th of June 2020. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and before we start, if I could just let you know about a few things, the usual housekeeping if you like, please head over to wpbuilds.com. That is our website where we put pretty much all of our content, but there's a few links in particular I'd like to mention. So for example, wpbuilds.com/subscribe allows you to subscribe to, well, two things. The first one is a newsletter telling you when we produce content, like this podcast. And the other one is letting you know about when we hear about deals. So, for example, maybe a particular plugin has gone on offer. Well, we'll let you know about that as soon as we hear about it. There's also opportunities on that page for you to subscribe to us on your favourite podcast player. And please, could I encourage you to join our Facebook group? There's a link on there, but it's wpbuilds.com/Facebook, because we have over 2,600 very polite WordPressers, and you might find that it's a community that you wish to engage with. Another page would be wpbuilds.com/deals. It's a list of products and services in the WordPress space, and the owners of those products have decided to give WP Builds listeners a bit of a discount. So there's coupon codes over there. It's searchable and filterable, and it's there 365 days of the year. Another option is wpbuilds.com/advertise if, like A/B split test, you would like to have your product or service put in front of a WordPress specific audience. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by A/B Split Test. Do you want to set up your A/B split test in record time, like in a couple of minutes? Use your existing pages and test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part, it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder, and the WordPress block editor. Check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Okie dokie. Right, just one final thing before we get started. On Tuesday, from now on for the next few weeks, I'm going to be doing a mini podcast series. It's a live podcast series with Sabrina Zaiden. Now, we're sort of slightly oddly calling this WordPress plugin startup from 0 to 10,000 installs, which is a slightly tongue-in-cheek way of saying things, because what we're doing is we're going on a journey from no experience to hopefully a little bit of experience about how to launch a plugin. Sabrina has her SpeedGuard plugin, and I'm helping Tom Carlos promote his A/B Split Test plugin. And so the idea is that we go through each week a few things that we've learnt on the previous week's journey. We're a couple of episodes in now, and the feedback has been really good. We've had some people joining us on the live, giving us their experience and the benefit of their knowledge about plugin launches already, and we've had people chipping in some good ideas. So just to say that that's going live, it's going to be on a Tuesday, 2 p.m. UK time. You can find that at wpbuilds.com/live. But come and join us. It seems to be a really interesting little project that we're running at the moment. Okay, what about today's podcast though? So we're on to episode number 185. I'm joined by James Rose. Now, James has been on the podcast a couple of times before, and at the end of this podcast, we do touch on the product that he's mentioned on previous episodes, that is Content Snare. He talks about how that's been updated and what's been going on over there. But the main thrust of this podcast is all about automating things and making it so that you don't have to spend time doing the boring jobs. Now, James is a real expert in this area, and as you'll find out, he's got a course about how to do all the things, automate all the things with Zapier, or Zapier, depending on how you pronounce it. And he talks about why you might want to do this, how you could do this, when the situation isn't appropriate, and so on. So it's a really interesting conversation. I know of no other person who is more an expert than James is, so it's well worth a listen. I hope you enjoy it. Hello there, welcome to the WP Builds podcast. Thanks for making it to the interview. Really appreciate you sticking around. I am joined today by James or Jimmy Rose. It doesn't really matter. We just had the discussion. Hiya, James.
Nathan, it is brilliant to be here. I am doing good. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, good. Interestingly, we didn't talk about this. You're in Australia, right? And the
Yes.
time we're recording this, Australia is massively in the news over here for the bushfires that are going on. Any chance that you're going to have to sort of leg it at some point during this interview?
No, like what they tend to report in the news is that like all of Australia is on fire.
Yeah.
I shouldn't laugh at all, but because it's obviously devastating. But it's mostly down south of where we are, right? So. Around Melbourne and Sydney are kind of copping it pretty badly. But up in Brisbane, most of the serious fires up here, I think, from my understanding, are pretty much gone. And we just have a little bit of haze occasionally. But I heard today that the smoke from those fires had made it to Chile across the entire ocean Pacific. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, good luck if you're involved in that. I hope it works out for you. But we're not here to talk about bushfires. We're actually here to talk about all sorts of things. Largely, we're going to be focusing on something which I am so not qualified to talk about, which I guess is good that James is here because he is. We're going to talk about automations and specifically automations based around Zapier. Now, I want to say Zapier, but every time I hear somebody else say it, they say Zapier, and I have no idea.
They're saying it wrong. You've got that absolutely right. It's Zapier.
Is it? Because it's a zap, right? And you don't create a zape.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
That is absolutely spot on. I think. The way it's spelled, it does look like Zapier. I've even heard someone say Zapier once, which is well off.
Yeah. Okay, so you're a heavy user of Zapier. We should say that you've got many irons in the fire. You've got quite a few things going on. There's a successful SaaS app which you have called Content Snare, which we may very well get onto. I don't know if you've actually used Zapier in conjunction with Content Snare, but you should probably go and check that out, see what Jim is all about. That's at contentsnare.com. But we're here to talk about Zapier. So first things up, when we talk about automation, obviously the idea is that you want to achieve things without actually doing any amount of work at the time the work is done. But automation requires that you do a lot of work up front. First question, is it always worth it? Are there situations where, do you know what, just do this manually, son? Don't bother wasting time creating a zap or an automation because there's just not enough traffic in this for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one thing quickly with automation, it's like not generally. I mean, so it's not specific to Zapier, right? Like I try to automate things as much as I can. And you opened by saying you're like the least qualified person, whereas beforehand you were telling me about an app called Descript, which for podcasting is basically like a whole bunch of automation, right?
Got it.
So you're clearly doing a lot of automation. It's just a different type. You're not specifically using Zapier. Like there are other ways to automate stuff and save time without specifically that. That's just where I spend a lot of my time. But to answer your question, there's definitely times where I like over-engineer the hell out of things and spend a bunch of time creating some kind of automation, and it never really pays back its time. But for the most part, I kind of see it like investing money. Like if you go and put $100 in an index fund or something, you expect to pay a little back each time and whatever. I see it the same with time invested with automation. So it might take me an hour to set up some kind of automation that might only save me 5 minutes a week, which kind of sounds like a waste, right? If you spend an hour doing something and save 5 minutes. But after 12 weeks, that's break even, right? You've got your time back.
Right.
And then from then on, you save 5 minutes a week, which still doesn't sound like much. But if you do this like 20 times, that's starting to add up really quick. And I did the maths in my account. I think it runs 9,000 to 10,000 tasks per month. Tasks is a Zapier word, but it's just like for an action. It's doing something, right? And if you say maybe 30 seconds per task, that adds up to about 75 hours or something a month.
Whoa. Okay. Right. Sold.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and it's taken a long time to get there. You don't just magically start saving 70 hours or whatever on the first week you're using it. But I've been using it for a few years now. And the side benefit of all these things adding up, so the time saved adds up, but then the side benefit is that you get better at making the automations as well. So it doesn't take you an hour anymore. It takes you 10 minutes to do the same thing.
Yeah, and I think this is the problem. This is where I fall off the radar absolutely every time, is in the process of setting them up. But something happens, and I think I could automate this. So I go into Zapier because I realize that the app that I'm using has a Zapier connection, and therefore it should be easy. And I get partway through setting up the automation, and then something happens. You know, I don't know, the child outside falls down and grazes their knee, and I never finish it. And that is my problem. I have no experience in the platform. I've got no history of working with it, and so that cliff edge where you get to the top and you're actually experienced enough to do things in a tenth of the time, I just haven't got to that point yet. So I'm hoping that you're going to kind of justify it. But that's incredible. I have to ask, right? Before things like Zapier came along, did you demonstrate kind of these habits? Did you always try to do these kind of things, like time-saving, labor-saving things? I don't know, like to-do lists and things stapled onto the walls of your house to demonstrate how to do things more quickly. My brother is exactly like you in that he automates absolutely everything. And I can see that throughout his life. He just wants everything to be efficient, and he can't stand inefficiency. He'll sort of take over the cooking regardless of whether you want him to, because he knows of a quicker way of achieving the same outcome. Is that you?
Yeah, to an extent. I don't remember when this started, but you'll love this. The fact that my previous job, when I still worked for the man, quote unquote, was an automation engineer. Like, this is literally everything that I've done. Like, when I remember being at school and talking to the counselor and being like, I like electrical stuff and I like mechanical and I don't know what I want to do. And they were like, do you know there's this middle ground called mechatronics engineering? And that basically led into a control systems and automation career. So I kind of joke that using Zapier and these other automation tools is my fix, because I don't get to automate big machinery anymore. Yeah. Now it's just like pushing data around the internet, but it's kind of the way I get my little fix and get my kick. When I fire up a Zap and it works and I can see everything sort of happening without me, and like that gets me super excited, which is kind of weird, I know, but I think a lot of developers can relate to that too. Yeah. Like if you're writing some code and like, I don't know, man, I've done some little happy dances around the office when I've like fixed something or written some code and it works. I don't know if you're the same.
Yeah, I totally get it. I just wondered if there was something in the sort of personality type, because I clearly there's a disconnect between you actually push through and get it done, and I somehow fall off the radar. Okay, so why have you chosen Zapier as the primary method through which you do this? Is it just because, okay, so let's take a step back. I know of 3 platforms which purport to do things, automations online, and connect various SaaS apps and so on. And the ones that I know of are, I don't even know how to say this, that one.
IFTTT.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. If this, then that. So IFTTT is the acronym. And there's also another one which is like a more visual-based tool, which is called Integromat. And then, of course, there's Zapier, which is like the giant of all 3 of those. Is there any particular reason to choose one over the other? Do you believe that one has a better interface than the other, or is it just because Zapier came along, you liked it, and you've stuck with it?
Well, I actually use all 3 for different things. There are actually other tools as well that I've kind of had a quick look at, but those 3 you mentioned are the only 3 that I'm actively using. So IFTTT is more for home automation, Internet of Things kind of stuff.
Right.
And you can see that pretty quickly by going through their list of apps and things they support. And there's like fridges and stuff in there, like very Internet of Thingsy type stuff. More personal. There are business apps in there like Trello and Google Drive, and there are a lot of stuff you can do for your business. But it's kind of limited, right? So if this, then that is very simple. It's that's in the name. It's if this, then that. If one thing happens, do this one thing. And that's kind of the end.
Right.
Whereas with Zapier, you build multi-step Zaps where you can say, if this happens, then do this, and this, and this. And if these conditions are true, also do this.
Okay.
Like you can build multi-step zaps and with conditions in there as well. So that's a pretty big improvement. That's only on the paid plans. Integromat takes that next level. And so, and funnily enough, as you step up through these different tools, the complexity also increases. Offline earlier, you said you used Integromat, and you were just like, "Holy, like I don't know what's going on here," right?
Yeah, it's pretty intense user interface with lots of circles connected with arrows and
yeah. And that's the easy bit. Once you start digging into the like behind each one of those circles, their interface becomes pretty awful. Like it's clearly one of these like built by developers for developers thing, even though they're saying it's a no code platform. You kind of have to be a developer to understand what's going on. And they've got like iterators, like we can iterate over different things that you pull out of previous steps, and like all these special objects and the very code like the building of automations in there. But it is a lot more capable than Zapier in like the automation itself. What makes Zapier shine is the fact that it's so like, because they've been doing this for so long, they have a massive ecosystem of apps. It's much bigger than all the other tools, right? Like, I think what they've done to win that is actually kind of, at some point they required people to build their own integration. So like Content Snare doesn't have a Zapier integration yet, but when it does, we will have to build that. Like Zapier aren't going out and building the integration, and they've got that economy of whatever you call it. Like they've hit that tipping point, critical mass, whatever, where they can ask people to build their own integrations. So now they just have a ton of apps that can be integrated with, and the other versions just don't really have that same flexibility.
Yeah, I confess. I mean, it's a long time since I acquired even a new startup app where there wasn't some sort of whiff of Zapier in the UI, in the admin area of whatever it was. It just seems that that's the default because that's where everybody is, and I suppose well done to them. So yeah, that's an interesting point. The amount of things in there. Do you know, as of the writing of this, is there sort of like a number of apps in there? I'm guessing it's kind of approaching the thousands, if nothing else. It must be.
It must be well over 1,000.
Yeah. Okay. So pretty much everything.
I actually don't know, but it says on their website more than 1,500 apps.
Okay. Yeah, and essentially anything that you've bought from, an enterprise level solution, I'm guessing will tie into Zapier. So anything, anything from Google, anything from, just about anybody. The question I have is, when I go into Zapier and I begin looking at my automations, as I said, I somehow can't push through. And it's largely, I think, to do with the fact that I'm really unclear about what it is that I'm trying to achieve. So what in your experience are good ways to begin? What would be a good baby steps automation to set up? Let's say, in my case, I'm building websites for somebody. Can you think of really interesting time-saving ways that I could just start working through automations with Zapier?
Yeah, so unfortunately, interesting ways tend not to be the easy ways to get started.
Okay.
Like generally based, you want to start with simple stuff. And you also kind of, there's like a catch-22. Like you said, you're approaching these without really knowing what you want to do. And that's kind of critical. You have to attack this like with an idea of what you want to do. But at the same time, you don't know what's possible unless you've actually dug in and played with it before. So that is kind of a problem. But I think it's good to just dig in there and attack some simple stuff first. The classic example is when someone fills out your contact form, add them to your CRM or your email system. Right. Like, that's the very bog standard integration that most people have. Like a lot of people will have a Zapier account and that's like their only Zap that they've got set up. And that's like the first example I go through in my course as well. But like then you can build on that and, you could have some like a radio select in that form that selects what services they're interested in, like could be web design or ads. And then you can start building in conditions like if they selected, when they fill out the form, add them to your CRM, and if they selected web design, do something else. I don't know if that's like send an email to a certain person on your team or something.
Right.
So that you can build on these things, but the place I always tell people to go to start learning is literally the Zapier website, right? So if you go to zapier.com, there's a couple of tabs across the top, one being apps and the other is explore. And apps, you can literally just search for apps you're already using. Like you can put in WordPress, or you can put in like if you're using a podcast app, or Calendly. You can type in Calendly or Google Sheets, and just all these different things that you're using, and scroll. If you go all the way to the bottom of the page for each app, there's a section describing the triggers and actions that app supports. A trigger being like the thing that fires off an automation. So for example, you could say when someone books my Calendly link, that would be a trigger. Add them to a spreadsheet, like add a row in a spreadsheet, that would be an action. And so you can actually just have a look through all the triggers and actions that the apps you're already using, and you can see what's possible. You can start building up a bit of an idea of like, oh, I could, when this happens in this app, I could add it over here. Like it's kind of hard without a specific example, but you're actually just building up this like repertoire of knowledge that is what enables you, I think, to go dig in later and actually create something. One step further than that is the Explore tab in Zapier. And this is probably a bit, maybe even easier when you're first getting started. It enables you to select multiple apps on one screen. So you could get in there and like tick Calendly, tick ActiveCampaign if you're using that for your emails, and then like Trello. And it will actually just give you a bunch of recipes for really simple apps. Like I'm just looking at one now, and it's just like create Trello cards from new rows on Google Sheets. Like I don't know if that's necessarily helpful for me, but you can just look through this like giant list of ideas that they give you, and it kind of tells you what kind of stuff you can do. And
right.
That's, I think, is critical, because if you don't know what's possible, then it's kind of hard to know where to start, right?
Yeah. And so presumably the knowledge that you acquire from that is, okay, I can now do something every time a Google Sheet gets a new line. And of course, you're not therefore limited to Calendly, or you're not therefore limited to Trello or whatever it might be. You just now have the knowledge that, okay, Google Sheets, new line, I can do something, and now I've got to go and find out what those triggers could be and match the two up to see. So do you sort of take the approach that you do that quite a lot? When you buy a piece of new software and you notice it's got Zapier, is that one of the things that you do, sort of go straight in and figure out, okay, what are all the actions that I could perform with this new thing? What are all the triggers that could be achieved, and so on? And indeed, do you not purchase SaaS apps because they don't have what you need?
It depends how much the app is like critical, and like how much it actually needs to be integrated with things. Like not everything needs to plug in. Yeah, I often will, because there are some apps that are kind of built poorly. Like you might think you're going to use an app to automate something and get in there and realize that it doesn't send the right data through on a trigger, and you can't actually do what you wanted to. So there is a lot of times I will go and check that out while I'm on a trial. But yeah, I mean, that is definitely a big concern for me, especially because like some apps have been in there for a long time, and as their apps improve, like they might add a new feature that hasn't actually found its way through to the Zapier integration yet. So just because it has a Zapier integration doesn't necessarily mean that it does everything that you want.
Yeah. Okay, so that's an interesting place to start, though. Simply look at those explore options on the Zapier homepage and see the kind of things that are possible, and then maybe just play with the recipes. It was interesting to see what the sort of economic barrier to this is. You mentioned that you typically fire off about 10,000 of these tasks, so I presume that a trigger and an action combined together make a task. Is that right? So as an example,
right?
Yeah. So just to take that a little bit further, let's say, for example, that I do add a line to a Google Doc, but instead of it going off and creating a Trello card, it creates a Trello card and it adds something to ActiveCampaign and it does something else. Is that still one task?
Three.
So it's
That's three.
Okay.
Yes, so it's per action. essentially, or per condition that passes. So, like, if you were to have a thing that said, if someone books and their name is Bob, then add them to a spreadsheet. If someone named Sarah books, then it costs no tasks at all.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's only for an action that happens or a filter, which is what they call conditions.
Okay.
Passes. I remembered just briefly what I was going to say before too. Like once you've built up this knowledge of what's possible, you're talking about the trigger of like adding a new row in a spreadsheet. The fact that I know you can trigger based on that has allowed me to do different things before, right? Like when people sign into our Facebook group or apply to our Facebook group, they put in some information and I have a script that can dump that information into a CSV file. And so immediately, because I've used Zapier, I can see that with that, like all I have to do is dump that CSV into a Google Sheet and set up a Zapier to trigger based on all that data, and now I can put them into my CRM or whatever. I know I probably didn't describe that very well, but does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally get it. It raises all sorts of interesting questions about GDPR and stuff, which we'll get onto a little bit later. But yeah, that makes total sense. But getting back to the point I was making prior to that, your 10,000 zaps or tasks, I should say, per month. Roughly speaking, what does that cost you?
I'm on a prorated plan. It was prorated grandfathered plan. So I got in a long time ago. I think I'm paying about 50, and the same plan now is around 120, I think.
Okay.
Just to quickly cover, so I don't sound like a total a-hole. We put them into our CRM once, like they actually set permission when they're entering the Facebook group. So I'm not breaking GDPR stuff here. Like they explicitly asked. So.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting. And we'll return to that point just because I presume you could, should you wish to, not honor things like GDPR and you could kind of abuse the system. Anyway, we'll come to that a little bit later. So yeah, roughly speaking, if I signed up in this the current pricing model that they've got, if I was to perform 10,000 tasks a month, I'd be looking at about a plan of about $120, something like that, which seems entirely fair. The other ones, are they free? Like if this then that and Integromat, do they have a pricing plan or is it just free?
So they all have a free plan, right? So you can get started on all of them for free. If this then that is actually free completely, but it's quite limited. Integromat's free plan is much less limited than Zapier. Like you can do a lot more. Just so you know, though, like you're not going to go to $120 immediately, right? You're going to start on one of the smaller plans, probably free. I think then it starts at I'm looking now, it's $18 a month is the first plan, right? So $18.33 billed annually. But that actually will get you started for a long time. And by the time you're up to paying $120 a month, if you're saving 75 hours, I think that's an easy payback.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sounds extraordinarily economically viable. The one of the things which always sort of troubled me in all of this was if I'm automating everything, how do I know it's working? I mean, I know you can presumably you can perform some sort of test at the point where you set it up and say, okay, from the data that I've supplied, we're all good. I've just filled out my Gravity form and look, that person is now in active campaign. Tick. Done. Forget about it. Never think about it ever again. Do you have to go back and check this stuff? Does it have robust ways of saying this is failing, something's broken?
Yes, so Zapier does. I'm not so sure about, I haven't played with Integromat enough. I presume they have some error logging. There is some level of trust, right? Like if it was failing and just not telling you, then, I mean, there's not really much you can do about it. But Zapier is a robust enough product that I have that level of trust now. And you can actually go into your task history, which is a page in Zapier, and you can see every task that's run. I think it's, I'm supposed to know this because I'm a Zapier certified expert and it was on the exam. But I think it's up to maximum 3 months or 10,000 tasks, whichever is the less.
Okay.
Is your task history. And it will actually tell you any that have had an error, any that are waiting for some reason or delayed, which ones have succeeded, which ones were filtered under conditions. There's a whole lot of different sort of states. And not only that, you can actually, if one does throw an error, you can click on it and go through every step of the Zap and see what data came in and out of each step, right? So you would be able to see the data that came from Gravity Forms and then see what got sent to ActiveCampaign or whatever email system you're using, and that might give you a clue into why it failed.
Right.
So it's not just like, oh, this one failed. It actually gives you all the data that it tried to send and the error that happened. So yeah, that's actually a lot of people don't realize task history is there, let alone how powerful it is. So it's another one of those things I go over in the course, because it's just like, that's how you debug.
Yeah. Okay. Does it just sort of an interesting idea there? So if, for example, I fire a Gravity form and it sends data, I don't know, to my WordPress website, but then also as part of the integration, it's sending stuff to Zapier, and Zapier at that point is consuming that data, doing whatever it's been told to do with it, and then pushing it to wherever it's supposed to be pushed to. Have you ever had a problem with the first part of that chain, if you like, the Gravity Forms bit that I've just described, failing and nothing going to Zapier? So Zapier's got nothing to show for it. Have you ever had problems with that?
Not really, unless it's like something's been blocked somewhere like that. There may be an issue on a web server or something, but generally, if you don't see it show up in task history, it means you've got a problem at the source. You know, like Gravity Forms isn't doing its job, or ActiveCampaign's not doing its job. But generally, that's pretty rare. And something I just go to support for the source.
Yeah, and presumably, if you've got like a WordPress website, which most of the people listening to this have, and it's likely to be something like a firewall or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay, thinking about particular Zaps then, and things that you found to be useful. Let's just run through a laundry list of 2 or 3 of the ones in your life which have proved to be the most effective. If you feel able to run down, what it is that you've set up that you thought, actually, that was gold. I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah, so there's a couple. One is actually really basic in that there's a built-in app in Zapier called Lead Score by Zapier. Lead Score is a little bit, it's not really the right term. It's more of lead enrichment, which is the process of looking up someone by their email address and getting some more information. So this is like a whole industry of companies that basically store data on people. I don't know how that works with GDPR, but you can essentially just put in an email address and get out a bunch of stuff about like how many people work for them or work at that company, what city that is. So like this can be valuable information in knowing like a bit more about your client. So for example, when someone signs up for Content Snare, we send their email over to this tool and it comes back with how many staff they have. And if it's more than 10, we know that they're in a better position to use Content Snare than, say, like a freelancer, right? Even though freelancers often use our software, those bigger companies tend to make better clients sometimes.
Yep.
So that is a really good flag for us. So then based on that, we have a filter in the Zap that says if staff is greater than 10, then drop it into my Trello. Right. So that enables me to immediately see because I basically live in Trello. So immediately I can tell if like a big client has signed up. So there's another one, you could set it to bigger than 100 staff, for example, and this is the way that I got on top of a really big client that signed up for Content Snare one time, like a top 10 airline in the world, a really, really, really big company. And this Zap fired and dropped it right in front of me. And I was like onto them immediately and was able to give them really personalized support live while they're using the app, because we have an in-app chat. And I don't know if that aided us in getting the sale, but that's pretty cool that was able to happen.
Yeah, that is cool. That's really ingenious. I like that. And also speaks to the fact that the Zaps are happening and they feel like one directional. They feel to me like, the example that I've just been continually using is Gravity Form into ActiveCampaign. But then interesting that you're polling some other service, you're pushing it to another service, and then they're giving you more information back, which then leads to another. And all of a sudden it's like a circle of virtue as opposed to just everything happening in one direction. Ah, that's fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah.
So actions do give you information back, right? Like, for example, if you want to expand on that Gravity Forms to Active campaign, you're not just pushing it into Active campaign. Active campaign still responds and says, oh, we added that contact, or they were already there and we updated them. So that could give you some data to say that, oh, this is an existing client, do something different in the rest of the Zap.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting. I think that is excuse me. If there's anything that I'm going to learn from today, it is that actually that it's giving more information back than I gave it credit for, and yeah, I need to pursue this a bit more. Any other good ones that you're happy with?
Yeah. Just actually expanding on that last one. There's a thing called Digest by Zapier, and it essentially builds up a list. So if I didn't want that person to jump into my Trello immediately, you can add it to a digest, and that it's an action in Zapier that just builds up a list of things, right? And then you can say every day at 5 p.m. release that digest, and it will then continue on with the Zap. And this is kind of hard to describe without screenshots, but so imagine at this point it's like I've just put 5 people's email addresses into a digest. And then that digest releases, I can put the whole list into my Trello. So I can quickly scan through those 5 or however many people signed up that day that fit my criteria. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, so digest is awesome because you can do stuff like, I don't know, all the activity that happened in my project management system today, roll that up into a digest and email it to me at the end of the day. All the leads that signed up today, send that to me at the end of the day. And it makes like a quickly scannable list for you to just go through. So it's like mini reports in a way.
Right. Okay. So do you then like block out a few minutes of your day just to sort of quickly scrape through that and see what's happened, and if anything's shouting out at you, you can see it and take action immediately?
Well, see, I'm really bad at remembering to do stuff like that, and that's why I do it as like a notification. So I'm not scraping out my time to do it. It just pops in right in front of me. Like you could email yourself if you're not in Trello, but Trello for me is life, right? Like I'm in it constantly. So I see the notification or see the card and I read it. Whereas, some people like to email them to themselves or whatever as like a end of day report, end of week report, whatever. So that was kind of just an extension of that one. Do you want me to go on with like another?
Maybe one more that you're really interested, because I did actually learn quite a lot from that one. That was really intriguing. So yeah, another one, probably there'll be
that's
another.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this one's kind of more relevant to us too, but in the podcasting space, I have one that when someone books in to go on my podcast, it takes a bunch of the questions. So I ask them for a little bit of an outline of what they want to talk about on the show. And it actually puts their name and their email and their websites and those questions into a Google document, which becomes my run sheet.
Yep.
So yeah, it just does some you can basically replace bits of a document with text. So like placeholders or variables within a document, which, that's a cool thing for a lot of designers right there. Like you can actually create Google documents like an invoice or something, and then use Google Cloud Print to turn that into a PDF if you like. That's another Zapier app, is Google Cloud Print. So you can convert documents to PDFs. But back on my Zap, that document then gets dropped into my Trello just before the podcast happens, so I can open it up and run through the sheet.
Good grief! There's a lot going on there, isn't there? It sounds
man.
So hang on a minute. So people fill out what I'm presuming is some kind of online form, whether that's Gravity form, some kind of online form. That then gets
Calendly, using Calendly.
Calendly, okay, great. So Calendly then pushes it to Zapier. Zapier then is told to create from variables bits in a Google Doc, which then gets pushed to Trello based upon some sort of Calendly event, the time of the day that the podcast is taking place, and then it pops up. Okay, interesting. And how do you know, though, with that one, how do you know that you've actually got that event? Does it add it to Google Calendar as well or something?
Yeah, so you've got a few options, but what you can actually, so there's a delay step in Zapier, and you can use a math step to calculate how long it's got a delay for, basically. Right. And then so you just leave it sat in that delay state. The downside of this is delay supports a maximum of 1 month. So there is a workaround where you can actually just base it off Google Calendar instead. That's like a workaround I cover in my course is triggering zaps using Google Calendar, because it falls down when you're trying to schedule things more than a month inside Zapier itself. So instead, you actually kind of have to create a Google Calendar event and then trigger another zap based when that event actually happens.
Yes.
So that's a bit of a workaround, but it's something you have to do sometimes just because of that built-in, that downside of Zapier, the maximum of a month delay.
Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning that I kind of mentioned for you, and you kind of, I think, agreed that you have a propensity to enjoy this kind of stuff. Are there any things where you've caught yourself? I mean, this is just a total aside. Any things where you've kind of caught yourself halfway through the creation of an automation and thought, this is so pointless. I'm simply doing this because I'm enjoying it. As in it's got no benefit. There's no way this will kind of get triggered often enough.
So not so much anymore. No. When I was getting started, absolutely. But now I'm kind of intentional. I know that I'm generally going in with the idea and trying to see if I can build it more often than not. It's so recently, this is kind of complex, but I built a referral system. I wanted to have a gravity form that people could claim a coupon code, and then it would put that coupon code into our billing system. That's one zap. And then the next zap was basically, and it would add them to a sheet. So we knew who that coupon belonged to.
Yep.
Google Sheet. And then I wanted to, I didn't know if this was possible, and I'm just sort of working through, and then created another zap that when a purchase is made, it finds the coupon, looks up the person in that same Google Sheet, and applies a credit to their account. So I knew that I wanted to do that, right? I wanted to create a coupon, have people be able to claim a coupon, and then if that coupon's used, give the owner a credit. That's all I was going in with, right? But I spent maybe an hour building that out because I just didn't know what was possible. But because I was intentional, I guess, about knowing what I wanted to build, I wasn't really wasting time. I just got the job done.
Yeah. I think that if I had been instructed to do that same thing, the hour would have happily expanded up to a week, and that's suddenly the sort of economic rationale for it. Just one of the things which occurs to me when you talk about this stuff is obviously in your case you're a real expert with this, and you've got a very high level knowledge of how it all works. But during the conversation, we've talked about all sorts of ways that it's producing data. So, it's producing this digest. It's producing a logging of errors. It's producing Google Sheets for you. It's pushing stuff into different CRMs and so on. Do you sort of ever get kind of overwhelmed with I've completely forgotten where this stuff's ending up. What Google Sheet was that? Where does that live? How did I achieve that? Is there a notion of looking back, thinking, whoa, okay, it was great to automate it, but now I've got just too much stuff that's happening?
Yes, absolutely. And the way I've kind of dealt with that is naming conventions and folder structures, right? I think that's every time I don't stick to my rules of those two things, I end up in exactly that state you were describing, just so confused. Where the hell is that bloody sheet that I know this zap is pulling from, but I can't find it, all the time. So I've gotten pretty diligent with creating folders in Zapier, because you can do that, and naming my zaps the right way, and actually naming the steps of the zap in the right way, right? So if I search for certain things, when you do a search through your whole Zapier account, it'll actually pull up, it's matching the step names within each zap as well.
Okay.
So that makes it a lot easier to find something. If I'm working with PayPal, I'm going to search PayPal, and then every zap that contains PayPal is going to come up. It's going to make it a lot easier to find. And the same thing with the sheets themselves, because I use a lot of sheets in zaps, and I generally try to have like a folder for Zapier sheets for different functions, for example, like different folders. You know, if it's for social media stuff, all the sheets related to that are in one folder. Sheets related to project management are in another folder, etc.
Anybody who has a digital life longer than a month old can identify with the problem of just trying to find anything. It's, you know, we all come up with our own naming conventions, but yeah, the amount of times I don't stick to it because it's just quicker, just type something.
Oh, yeah.
It's just so easy. Here's a question. I remember several years ago, this is a lot of years ago, probably 5 or 6, Troy Dean in a Facebook post venting on Zapier because some of his automation, I don't know if the system went down or the platform went down, but a ton of his stuff just failed for a period of time. And I don't know if it was like, you know, they'd set something up incorrectly or, you know, like I say, the system went down. But it feels like, you know, I used Google Reader as my RSS reader, and then it went away. They just pulled the plug. Zapier presumably has to be profitable. It has to be up and running. Are you completely trusting Zapier? Are there any parts of you which are sort of saying, I am really in deep on this one platform. I'm slightly concerned that it's going to be around in a decade or 5 years or whatever?
Not really, because I mean, I'm saving enough time now that it kind of makes it all worthwhile. I don't think they're going anywhere, but you can apply this same thing to anything, right?
Yeah.
Like any tool that you're using, like Zapier is just connecting a few other tools, you know, and you could maybe make the argument that you're better off using an all-in-one platform. But then what if that all-in-one platform goes away?
Right.
You know, you're screwed. I actually prefer to use like a master, like I like the kind of jack of all trades versus master of none thing, where like I like to use best in class apps and connect them all with Zapier, rather than like a jack of all trades, one that like an all-in-one type platform.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, in what you're talking about, it's almost like spreading your risk as well. You know, like if one of those apps goes away, you can just find a replacement. But I know that, yeah, sure, Zapier could go away, but then maybe you just move it all to Integromat or something. You know, like I feel like this is an industry that's here to stay.
Yeah, fair enough. That's good. Just another sort of question. In the era, I mean, I'm sure you're the same as me. You probably get countless emails every day where it's pretty clear that automation has been heavily applied to the email that you've received. You know, it's got like the I don't know, the grammar seems all wrong. The fact that your company name just simply doesn't fit in that sentence, and you know, clumsy use of your first name and all of this kind of stuff. Do you have any sort of caveats about automating things that are kind of user facing? The reason I'm saying this is because it feels like there's a certain segment of the market which is rejecting this. You know, things like Buongiorno. I forget if that's maybe Buongiorno. Yeah. I can't remember how you pronounce it. And Dob and all these various different apps who are making the exact opposite decision. And although you can automate various things in there, you know, it's more about the personal touch. Do you have any sort of feelings about that? Like things not to automate?
Absolutely, but I still classify Buongiorno as an automation tool.
Good.
So I don't see it as opposite at all. I use Buongiorno, and in fact, I'm a big proponent of, I guess I'd call it like automation assisted personalization. Like, so for example, instead of what I used to do is when certain people signed up, I would sit down at my computer. Signed up for Content Snare. I would sit down, I would use Loom or something. You know, before Loom, it was something even more like difficult, but I'd have to be at my computer and I hit the Loom button, I record, I talk to them, and then I hit copy the link and I put it in an email and I send it to them, right? But with Buongiorno, when someone signs up, it pops up as a notification on my phone. I click the notification, I record a video for 30 seconds, hit send, and it's done.
Nice.
So everything around that is automated, but you still personalize the message. And this is like that example before when certain clients signed up, I would drop that into my Trello and manually reach out to them. You know, so that bit wasn't automated. It was like assisted. It was automation assisted so that it told me, now go and talk to them. You can take it another step further, and I could have got it to create a draft Gmail in my account, and then put the link to that in my Trello for me to open up the draft, complete it, and then send it to them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no,
there are all these ways you can still personalize.
Yeah, I really like that, the way that you've just described that. I think you've just summed that up perfectly. In effect, the bits that you want to be very personal, you are simply getting notifications. Okay, it's time to do the personal thing, which is nice. I think that's a really nice, healthy balance. I think it's really nice when you get those kind of videos and somebody has clearly taken a personal step. And actually, the people who make the effort to do that, I feel are separating themselves. You're like oceans apart from the people who simply send out the automated message, because we live in an era where automation is so prevalent that getting a personal message, in your case, you're holding up the phone, you're getting a video, somebody's actually said my name on the video. It's pretty clear James did this. This is not AI. This is not James AI. This is actual James. I think that's great. Really nice. You said earlier that you were a certified Zapier expert, but it goes a little bit further than that, because I would like you to promote your Zapier course, because you haven't just come on here to tell us all about what it is that you can do. You come with a Zapier mastery course as well. So tell us a little bit about that, where we can find it, what its primary purpose is, who maybe it's suitable for. Is it beginners, experts, what?
Yeah, so the reason that exists, thanks for that, by the way. For introducing it. But the reason it exists is because literally so many people were asking me about Zapier. Like I had some people in the local community here in Brisbane say, like, literally, I will give you money to teach me Zapier. And I was like, but like, I don't think you will. I think that's a lie.
Yeah.
So, because, until people put their money where their mouth is. So I did like a pre-launch to see if people actually would, and lots of people did. So then I went, oh crap, I better make the course. Yeah. I was kind of expecting it to be like, oh yeah, see, everyone was actually kidding. I can go on and do whatever I was doing before now. But then yeah, like the response kind of blew me away. So now I made the course. It basically covers basics. It starts with the basics and goes through to advanced, right? So that was always the thing in the back of my mind, is like, in fact, I had a single person, a friend of mine, who is so like anti-tech, well, not anti-tech, just like doesn't really know anything about tech. I had her in my mind the entire time I was creating this course, because like, if I had to explain it to someone that just had no idea, how would I do this?
Yeah.
So that's why I start really, really basic, and then work my way through to some of the most advanced tactics I know with Zapier that even like a lot of experts that I've spoken to don't know, like just workarounds and ways to work with sheets that generally people don't think about. It's actually quite funny. A guy, if you go to where the course is at jimmyrose.me, it says Zapier Mastery, but you just click Zapier course in the main header, and it'll take you there. There's actually a testimonial from a guy that said, and offline, outside of that testimonial, he said he went back to the first. He actually did the course twice, and the second time through, he was like, "Oh my God, you must have been so bored recording these first few, because now that I actually know what I'm doing and I go back, they seem so easy." And I was like, yes, you're right.
Yeah,
It was really difficult.
Yeah.
But that was exactly what I've tried to do, is take it from really, really simple and build up slowly to the super advanced stuff. And Gabriel, the guy in the testimonial, said he never used Zapier, and 2 days afterwards he built an 18-step Zap that saves him an hour a day. So that was really fun.
Yeah. That is good. Yeah. I mean, that's a proper testimonial, isn't it?
Right?
So what format does it take? Are we watching a bunch of videos with you on the screen and you sharing your screen and so on? And how many? How long does the course take to complete?
It's just videos and me. There's a Facebook group that goes along with it, and occasionally I share other stuff in there. But yeah, for now, I mean, I plan on building on this, but right now I think it's about 52 videos or something, maybe 4 hours or 3 hours. Okay. I actually can't remember now. Yep. I should know, but I don't.
It's okay. There's plenty in there. And roughly speaking, what's at the time of recording this video? Obviously, we won't commit you to anything. What's the investment required to get this in your bag?
It's currently $3.99 US, but
Okay.
you know what? Because this isn't going out live, I guess I can create a coupon.
Ah, yeah,
uh,
okay.
yeah, why not? WP builds, right?
Okay, let's you
Um,
don't have to commit yourself to the amount. That's
no, no,
completely fine.
no, no. We'll go $100 off for
Oh,
WP
nice.
builds.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
down
great.
to 2.99. I just got to make sure I put
2.99.
this in
So
my to-do
okay,
list.
I'll either edit that bit out or just keep it in and show how very nice you are. So 2.99 if you use the coupon code WP Builds. I promise that was completely unsolicited. Very nice. Thank you very much. And you can find that, just to be very clear, although I'll drop it into the show notes. James Rose's sort of personal website, if you like, is jimmyrose.me. JIMMYROSE.me. And the course can be found in the main menu at the top, or if you want to be old school, / Zapier Mastery. And that will get you there, and you can see James right at the top in a video, and you click on the button, get Zapier Mastery, and taken over to the cart. That's great. The other thing, very briefly, is I'd like you to talk about Content Snare, your other main project. What does it do? Because I know that it's a super fit for our audience.
Yeah, in fact, I think I've been on the
You
podcast
have.
many moons ago to
Yeah,
talk about
yeah.
Content Snare.
But
Probably
it's
in the early
updated
days.
recently, hasn't it? It's been gone through a huge UI overhaul, and we're on V2 now.
Yes. Yeah, I think I was on your podcast back in 2017.
Okay, that's right at the
So that's a
beginning. Yeah.
long time ago. Yeah. But yeah, a big version 2 overhaul. So for people that don't know, it's a platform to make it easier to get content from clients. So it's typically used by digital agencies to collect website content or marketing content, even things like website questionnaires, creative briefs. Like, I'm seeing new uses for it every day. I'm almost saying it's a platform to collect information from anyone, because people are using it for all kinds of stuff. I've been content snared by our own tool for speaker information before an event. That's how I felt like I'd made it when I got
Somebody actually used it on you.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of versatile, but the biggest use for it is website content, and the idea is to make one central place to collect everything, rather than trying to do it through documents and here and there and everywhere, and shared folders and these email trails that end up massive, and version control kind of gets out of whack. They send the wrong files. So it's kind of just one place for it all, where you can constrain what they put in, and then it automatically reminds them on a schedule to actually follow, like to put the content in, so you're not having to do that.
Yeah, and let's be honest, we all know that is a real, actual, definite problem. James is not making this up in the hopes that you go out and buy a useless SaaS app. We actually need this. Good grief, the amount of time I waste. Yeah. So in a sense, it's automation for that. Yeah, go and check it out.
Yeah, specific automation.
Yeah, contentsnare.com. Good grief, we're on 53 minutes, James. Wow.
Whoa.
We sort of
really?
aimed for about 30 to 40, and we've totally overreached. So I'm gonna.
Sorry about that.
No. I was really, really interested. Do you know? This is an area, although I haven't had it as one of my New Year's resolutions, if you like, it is an area that I feel I'm going to need to get better at because of various things that are happening in my life this year. So I'll probably be knocking on your door at some point. I'm going to hand the floor to you. Whatever you like, Facebook groups, Twitter URLs, regular URLs, anything you want to mention, go for it.
Oh gosh, I mean, it really is just go to the jimmyrose.me. If you click the YouTube link, I hope it's there somewhere. If you search for Jimmy Rose on YouTube, you'll find me. That's kind of the main way I'm communicating with people now, is sort of automation videos and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you do want to get me on Twitter, it's _Jimmy Rose, and on Instagram, it's get Jimmy Rose. Story behind that, don't ask.
Okay, I won't ask in that case. James, thank you so much. I realise it's probably ridiculously late o'clock where you are. Thanks for joining us on WP Builds today. I really appreciate it.
Nathan, it's been a pleasure, and I hope that was helpful.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that. It was an absolute pleasure chatting to James about that stuff. It's an area that I've got real interest in, but somehow I haven't really managed to get to the excellent heights that James had. So hopefully some real interesting content in there and things that you can actually implement. I certainly hope so. The WP Builds podcast was brought to you today by AB Split Test. Do you want to set up your A/B split test in record time? The new A/B split test plugin for WordPress will have you up and running in a couple of minutes. Use your existing pages and test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part, it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder and the WordPress block editor. You can check it out at absplittest.com. Right, we produce a lot of content each and every week. The next thing you're going to hear will be a podcast on Monday. It's the WP Builds weekly WordPress news. That comes out at 7 a.m. UK time. Also, we'll be live at 2 p.m. UK time to discuss that news. I'll be joined by some notable WordPress guests. And as I said at the top of the show, I'll be joined on Tuesday live by Sabrina Zaidan so that we can talk about how to increase the reach of our plugins. I'm going to fade in some cheesy music and say bye-bye for now.